What's the craziest true story you've ever lived through? Story 1. During my last semester at a certain college, I was assaulted by a football player for walking, where he was trying to drive. Note he was 125 pounds. I was 120 pounds. While unconscious on the ground, I lived a different life. I met a wonderful young lady who made my heart skip and my face turn red. I pursued her for months and dealt with a few unpleasant boyfriends before I finally won her over. After 2 years, we got married, and almost immediately she gave birth to our daughter. I had a great job, and my wife did not have to work outside the house. When my daughter was 2, my wife gave birth to our son. My son was the joy of my life. I would walk into his room every morning before I left for work and dote on him and my daughter. One day while sitting on the couch, I noticed that the perspective of the lamp was odd, like inverted. It was still in 3 dimensions, but just wrong. It was a square lamp base, red with gold trim on 4 legs and a white square shade. I was transfixed and could not look away from it. I stayed up all night staring at it. The next morning I did not go to work. Something was just not right about that lamp. I stopped eating. I left the couch only to use the bathroom at first, and soon I stopped that too, as I was not eating or drinking. I stared at the lamp for 3 days before my wife became very worried. She had someone come and try to talk to me. By this time, my awareness was breaking up and my wife was panicking. She took the kids to her mother's house just before I had my epiphany. The lamp was not real. The house was not real. My wife, my kids, none of that was real. The last 10 years of my life were not real. The lamp started to grow wider and deeper, still with inverted dimensions. It took up my entire perspective, and all I could see was red. I heard voices, screams, all kinds of strange noises, and I became aware of pain, an enormous amount of pain. The first words I said were, "I'm missing teeth," and then I opened my eyes. I was lying on my back on the sidewalk surrounded by people I did not know, many of them freaking out. I was completely confused. At some point, a police officer scooped me up, dragged or walked me across the sidewalk and grass, and put me face down in the back of a police car. I was still confused. I was taken to the hospital by the officer. He seemed not to want to wait for the ambulance to arrive, and given CT scans and other tests. I went through about 3 years of severe depression. I was grieving the loss of my wife and children and dealing with the knowledge that they had never existed. I was scared that I was going insane as I would cry myself to sleep, hoping I would see her in my dreams. I never have, but sometimes I see my son, usually just a glimpse out of my peripheral vision. He is perpetually 5 years old and I can never hear what he says. Story 2. A man in the forest kills animals and chases after me while ringing bells in the dark. This is truly the scariest, most horrible thing that has ever happened to me. I have never been so petrified in my life. To this day, I still do not know who this man was, what he was trying to do, or if he still is where I saw him. I am sorry for how long the geographical description is. I just want everyone to understand how secluded I was when this happened and how badly it could have ended if it had not been for my parents. I was back home for the summer for the first time in a year after starting university. Our home was and still is just outside of a small town with forests all around. There was also a small man-made lake, which was diverged from a river that ran for miles through the forest and branched into a few streams east of the lake. Near my home, there was a small grassy path that led to the river following a stream. It was a long walk, but one I used to go on often as a child. I knew the forest there well and knew where I could cut through dense trees to meet the stream. The walk I would go on always led me off the path, which turned northwest slowly, away from the stream, and then took a sharp turn to the west after a few miles, at which point the stream was hidden quite deep into the forest. I would continue to walk north and follow the stream through the forest to get to the river, then follow the river west to get to the lake. It is easy to get lost in this forest because the terrain is not just a slope down to the water. It goes up and down, and you end up completely surrounded by trees. I had spent many days wandering around there alone, or with my dad over the span of 18 years and had never seen anybody else in the forest. I went there twice that summer, both times alone. The first time I left in the morning, I walked along the path away from the stream to the sharp bend, then cut back into the forest. I reached the stream after an hour or so. As I was running my hands in the water, I heard a bell from far away, coming from the north. Something was making a bell ring fervently and periodically, which I found strange. I listened carefully, wondered if it was a lost hunting dog, and started moving toward the sound. I know I would be the first person to die, but I was heading north anyway, so I thought, why not? I realized it could not have been an animal. I could tell the bell was too heavy because of how clear the sound was to be on a collar. I kept moving and the bell was moving away from me. It stopped completely after 5 minutes. The stream was not big enough or strong enough to carry a bell that could have been enclosed in a tin or something, and the river was still too far. I thought of everything, but nothing explained the sound apart from one obvious thing, which I just did not feel comfortable with for some reason. I knew it had to have been a person. I stopped thinking about it and just walked on normally until I found a badger. It was a dead one, carefully decapitated. It had obviously been done with a knife. It was fairly fresh, the body was still limp, and there was not too much smell coming from it. The wound was full of maggots, but I knew that happened soon after exposure. The sound of the bell had been following the stream, so had I. So the badger was put there, maybe killed there, at least decapitated, while I was walking that way. Nothing else happened that day. 1 week later, I went back for the second time that summer and the last time ever. I left home at around 6 in the evening. I made it to the stream, then walked to the river in an hour, then decided to go back the way I came, because it was getting late and it was raining quite heavily. The sun set at around 9 in the evening. I was walking as fast as I could. The sound of the rain in the trees was surreal and loud. I was somewhat trotting with my head down for a while through the clearest and most open part of the forest when I bumped into something heavy. The smell was sickly. It was the decomposing body of the badger with its head strung to its front paws. That area looked a bit like a ham because of the way it was tied, just swinging from a tree like an almost literal load of filth. It was this putrid bag of stench, wet and dripping green liquid. I started gagging. I had some sort of mucus-textured fluid in my hair. It was repulsive. At first I just stared at it, slightly stunned. Then I started fidgeting violently because I felt like I was drenched in its juices. I was soaking from the rain. My senses became confused. It felt like a bucket of ice-cold water had been thrown over me when I realized that I had walked the same way to get to the river. So someone had strung up the body after I had passed it on the way there. Someone knew I would see it. So was someone watching me and running around the forest? Were the faint sounds of branches breaking around me not animals? I looked around and started jogging. I was half running, half walking away from the stream, back towards the path for a while, when I heard the bell again. I proceeded to call my dad while running. I told him to meet me on the path where it sharply turns west. It was the closest part of the path to me. I told him to go as fast as he could and that someone was in the forest. I cannot explain the feeling I had. It was like my insides had dropped out. I literally felt the hairs on my neck raise despite being soaked. It was dark. I jogged as fast as I could. I was panicking because the path was still a bit far away, just too far to feel safe. It was still raining. Every single sound was muffled. I felt like everything was further away than ever before. The bell went on for way longer than the last time, on and off. I felt like it was surrounding me at one point. The fear combined with my compromised hearing and the fact that I could not breathe properly was making me slightly lose my sense of direction. I was automatically heading southwest, but I was not really sure what I was even doing. I was breathing heavily, coughing, kind of crying out loud like a toddler, tripping over leaves and twigs. I stayed on the phone with my mom, who was on her way with my dad. I kept hearing sounds, but I was not sure what they were. My mom was screaming on the phone at the same time that they were on the path, that I needed to run, that my dad had gotten out and was heading east from the path bend. I was terrified, so I went into survival mode. I was doing the half-running, half-speed walking thing again because I was out of breath. Then I heard branches break, clear footsteps for the first time from down in the forest, and the bell ringing louder. I did not want to, but I looked over my shoulder. That is when I saw what was in the forest with me. A tall figure creeping in my direction at the very end of the clearing, ringing this bell slowly in front of his stomach. I could tell he was staring straight at me. Now, I do not know if I had a hidden secret sprinting ability or instinctual adrenaline-induced powers, but when I tell you I ran for my life, I did not look back once. I screamed as much as I could. I lied. I am on the phone with the police. They are on the path. Dad, I can see you. I am here. I wanted to yell, Dad, please, where are you? But I kept that to myself. I felt like something awful was going to happen. I felt like the man was right behind me. I kept telling myself not to look back. I was gasping and wheezing, crying so hard and screaming for my dad. I felt shivers on my neck and then switched off. I just ran. I even dropped my bag and only realized I did not have it anymore when I was in the car. I felt like my phone was my only way home. Things no longer felt real. It was like my legs were moving by themselves. I did not know if the man was still following me. I could only hear my heart beating in my ears and the bell. I finally heard my dad shout my name, and I knew he was coming my way and that he could see me because of the intonation of his voice. I pretty much lunged myself at him when we got to each other. My dad heard the bell too. My mom could hear it on the phone. She was waiting with the car ready to leave fast. Story 3. A week ago, my boyfriend told me he had a camping trip planned with his friends on Friday. Today, he said he would have no service and he would see me on Sunday. He messaged me at 5 in the morning today and told me they were hitting the road. Around 8, I went for a run like I usually do on Fridays. I had one headphone in while I did because I was on a work call. While I was running, I noticed a sport utility vehicle that kept appearing. In hindsight, it looked just like my boyfriend's childhood friend's car. I sent a message to my sister saying to stand by and shared my location. Right after sending the message, I looked up, and the sport utility vehicle was right beside me, and someone jumped out and grabbed me. It happened so fast, I even dropped my phone on the pavement. I was pulled into this car, and I could tell there were at least 2 masked people in the back before they covered my eyes. In hindsight, they had cartoonish ski masks and black gloves on. I panicked and resisted, screaming and kicking. All I could hear was these people laughing, and I could feel one of them holding me down by my arms behind me, and the other was holding my legs down at the knees. I do not know how long I was in there, but I kept begging them to let me go and crying. I admit I urinated on myself, but I do not think they noticed until we arrived at the house. They pulled me out of the car, and I was shouting for help until I was pulled into a house. When the covering on my head was removed, I was on my knees in front of my boyfriend of 2 years. He was staring at me with a confused look before he started to ask his friends what was going on. As I started to adjust to what was going on, I realized he was dressed nicely, and there were romantic decorations around the entryway to his house. I realized who he was and what was going on and collapsed into sobs. I probably had a 5-minute panic attack in that car on my way there, and another one sitting in the entryway to his house. I was sweaty, wearing soiled yoga pants, flushed with fear, and scared for my life. That was all about an hour or 2 ago. My boyfriend took me upstairs and was going to help me get showered and changed, but I wanted to do that alone. I heard yelling and commotion downstairs while I showered, but I do not know what is going on. I am sitting in his room now, holding my shattered phone after crying to my sister about what happened. She lives 1.5 hours away, but is driving over to get me now. I cannot stop thinking about what happened, and even though I know now I was never in any danger, I do not think my brain can comprehend it. They were snickering and teasing me in deepened voices about what they were going to do to me. The one who was holding my legs down kept touching my thighs inappropriately, up and down toward the inner area. When the car would brake, the person's face kept bumping into my chest. I do not even know who that was. I just know one of them sounded unsure and kept trying to defuse the situation, but I think it was the driver. Story 4. I will start this story by saying that I do not think I am a good person, and it is a story with some collateral damage, but it is a story about one troubled person responding to another. Backstory. I, 34 male, was raised by a single mom because my dad passed away when I was younger, but I had many male role models and older brothers, and he left behind a generous life insurance policy, so I largely had a good upbringing. However, I was not ever very social, and from my early teens, I spent a lot of time in front of my computer. This habit got worse as I went to college, and it resulted in me spending 80% of my time gaming, working, reading, or whatever on a screen. As a result, I was not very active and became quite obese at the age of 20. For these reasons, I never really dated and did not even lose my virginity until I met my ex-fiancé. On top of this, I was raised very religious because my mom became really religious after the death of my father, so I always thought it was a bad idea to play the field. The one thing I had going for me was that I had become somewhat proficient in several coding languages and expanded on these in college. I would not say that I am a great information technology person or coder, but with a little bit of coding knowledge and a lot of creativity, you can create residual income streams. And I had a decent job in information technology where I could work from home 3 days a week. At the age of 24, I was still overweight and socially awkward. But through my mom, I met a woman from her Bible study who would eventually become my ex-fiancé, 36 female now. We hit it off and started dating. She had a 2-year-old son at the time, and they became the only thing in my world that I cared about. It did not take me long to become physically intimate, and all those years of pretending I was saving myself went out the window when I finally had the chance to lose it. To be honest, she really broke me out of my shell, and I became more sociable within a couple of months of meeting her. I even took on a fatherly role for her son, and within 6 months of dating, she became pregnant. Being the religious person I was, I immediately proposed and wanted to marry before the birth of the baby. Then she told me she was still legally married to a man in prison. This did not bother me too much, as she had always talked about her troubled past, and I thought I would be the one to help her out of it anyway. So I just took this as part of the situation. She began the divorce proceedings shortly, and we planned to get married as soon as those were finished. I was feeling hopeful after the baby was born and thought I had really carved a place for myself in the world. I even started losing weight and spent less time online than ever. She was always kind to me, and I thought we shared everything we were thinking, but I was wrong. There were a few red flags that I was too love-struck to see. First, she told me early on that the only reason she got involved with my church was that she was on probation and had pending court cases and thought it would help her case. Second, despite me earning a comfortable 6-figure income with side projects in my main information technology job, she insisted that she keep her part-time job, and my mom had to help me take care of the kids to deal with it. Third, she knew far too many people. What suburban mom with a clerical job has 200 contacts in her phone? Fourth, we kept delaying our marriage due to sick relatives or other issues, although she did go through with the divorce from the man in prison. Then something happened that changed everything. She became pregnant a second time, and this time with twins. We had only been with each other for about 4 years, and we were about to have 4 kids, 2 more than I thought I would ever have. She claimed she was on birth control at the time, so we were not using condoms. After the twins were born, I started seeing my doctor about a vasectomy, and my ex-fiancé encouraged it. I wanted to have some genetic material frozen before the operation, because we could completely change our minds in 5 years. I went in for the visit, and the doctor came out to tell me that my sperm count was low and they were mostly not moving well, but this problem might be temporary, and I should try to eat a healthier diet for a few weeks and come back. When I came to the second appointment and the same problem arose, the doctor started doing some investigating, and you can guess where this is going. The doctor said it was likely that I was infertile. This turned out to not be completely true, as I now have a child that I know is biologically mine, but it still propelled the following events. I mentioned that I had 3 biological children, and the doctor looked anxious and started talking. But I was in shock and did not really process what he was saying. I think I left the office before they were even done with me. I did not even get in my car. I just walked until it started to get dark and eventually called a ride to get home. My fiancé was worried and already asleep inside, and I just told her my car broke down, my phone died, and I was at the mechanic late and forgot to let her know. I fell asleep, woke up the next day, and immediately got on the computer to research similar stories and gave myself false hope. The first post I read was about how fertility assessments are not always correct and that I should 100% get a test. I thought for sure this would show the doctor was wrong, but I got the test back, and within a week I knew the kids were not mine. The first person I told was my mom. I went to her house and cried for the first time in my adult life. She consoled me and then told me a story that I was never meant to hear. Essentially, I am the product of an affair myself, and that my dad actually died from an overdose on pain medication after he found out. I do not know why my mom thought this would comfort me, But in reality, it just gave me a negative view of relationships for a while. After the story and calming down, she insisted that I step up and honor my commitment to these kids because I was the only father they had ever known. Up to this point, I had always been passive, and I really considered her words for about 24 hours before I completely snapped. I called my fiance and told her I had to stay the night at my mom's house because of a family issue, and she offered to make us dinner, which I declined. At this point, the twins were about 6 months. The boys were 2.5 years and about 5 years old. I will not lie and say that I felt nothing for these kids, but it was hard to look them in the face, and I knew I was done being their father. I knew this would upset them and cause harm, but I could not stand to hear them say "Dad" to me because every time it felt like a knife in my heart. I kept my composure and did not reveal anything, and my mom did not say anything. I assumed because she thought I was going to continue. I spoke to an attorney because I wanted to remove my name from the birth certificates of these children, and I thought I could slip out of this situation because we were not married. Unfortunately, after going through the paperwork and finances, since I had intertwined much of our money and I had taken on a fatherly role, I would be responsible for at least the boys' support, and she would get equity in the house and my side businesses. Basically, the lawyer said that I would likely be responsible for about 25% of my income for many years to come. I stopped talking to my lawyers after paying the initial fee because I did not like the idea of being forced into that. The response begins here. I started to make a plan to disappear and leave them all with as little as possible. The start of this was ending all of my passive income streams and getting myself fired. Getting myself fired was easy, though a bit embarrassing. I acted out at work, destroyed an old office printer in the courtyard, and did not do anything while working from home except send jokes to coworkers. But I did not harm clients because my boss was actually a friend of mine, and my office mates had a good time watching the spectacle. After this, I did not even try to file for unemployment and began living off our savings. My ex-fiancée let me handle all the financials despite both of our names being on everything, so she did not notice our accounts slowly draining and the finances slipping into chaos because I left her checking account with a few thousand, while the credit card balances rose because I stopped paying them. I sat there for months wondering if I should give up, but ultimately decided against it. I obtained ancestry test kits for the kids in an effort to find who their actual father was because I was hoping to get them away from my ex. But this resulted in even stranger findings. Essentially, the oldest child was a cousin or half-brother to his siblings, so the man in prison's brother must have been the father, and I did not see any relatives from the test that I thought would be a good fit. So that was the end of that investigation. I also tried to distance myself from my mom as I had become upset by what she did to my dad and her apparent alliance with my ex. I formulated a plan to get away, far away, from everything by vanishing on a hiking trip. I emphasized this hiking trip and claimed I would be in a remote location for a week alone with my thoughts on the trails. Before the trip, I took the then about 6-year-old out for ice cream and cried for the second time in my adult life. The 6-year-old was obviously distressed at seeing his dad cry and tried to calm me down. I was crying because I had to leave him, and I told him I was sorry many times. But I think he was just confused about the situation. I was most concerned about losing him because I knew he was not my child, and I had still formed a bond. I left that afternoon and actually made my way to the lodge and checked in. Now, the next part I will mostly skip because I am not sure about the legalities, but cut to 6 months later, and I have a new name and live in a new city where I was able to restart my information technology career and was slowly working toward my old income again. I started viewing my ex's social media. It was cathartic, to say the least. The confusion of them trying to get into accounts must have been overwhelming, and she figured out that our comfortable finances were not so comfortable after all. Asking for money on social media is not a good look. I will not mention the legal aspects, but many people went looking for me, and I considered calling the police to let them know that I was okay, but decided against it and later paid a fine for this, which was worth it to me. I worked on myself for a long time and got into great shape. I moved away from my past beliefs and lived freely. I became unrecognizable. I continued viewing this woman's posts for about a year when I heard she was dating a new person and became pregnant almost immediately. Of course, my mom was still in her life, taking care of my supposed children while she was doing who knows what. Then on the 1-year anniversary of me leaving, she posted a memorial page for me. This made me decide that my response was not quite done, and I decided to call my brother and let him know I was alive. My brother and I had drifted over the past 10 years, but he was family and was always there when I was younger. I told him why I did what I did, and we caught up, and I asked him not to tell anyone yet, and he agreed. Then he told me about my mom and my ex-fiancée suing my insurance company to honor my life insurance. Somehow, she had managed to keep up this policy despite its cost. The payout would be substantial, in the 7 figures, and she would be awarded the premiums that she had paid since my alleged passing if she won. I am not the kind of person who would defraud an insurance company, so I made plans. I drove the 1,000-mile journey to my old city when I heard she had an upcoming hearing and listened to classic rock on the way. I went to the court early and sat down. At this time, I had grown a beard, lost 60 pounds, and generally looked good. I looked so different that my fiancé and mother passed right by me in the court without giving me a second look. I thought they would be meeting in a big courtroom, and I was already planning to announce myself dramatically, but they ended up going to a small room with some lawyers from the insurance company. I decided to knock on the door several times until they opened it. They were all confused to see this scruffy man with a beard, and I simply said, "I believe you are trying to settle the issue of whether I am dead." My ex-fiancé realized it was me almost immediately and let out a gasp. The lawyers were confused. Everyone ended up stepping outside the room, and a whirlwind erupted, and the officers were called over. My ex shouted and slapped me, and they had to put handcuffs on her. This was a big deal for the insurance company, and the lead counsel actually showed up and asked for statements, and even a detective arrived, and I started to regret coming, but I gave my statement and did not lie about anything, though I was vague about where I was currently living. I ended up staying in town for almost a month in a cheap motel. I showed evidence of my ex's cheating to anyone who cared, and I tried to meet with the kids, but the youngest did not know me, and the then 7-year-old told me to leave, which is understandable. The police were upset and started civil action for the costs of searching for me. A detective actually flew in from another state to question me. I did not get arrested because I did not want my fingerprints linked to my new identity. Essentially, I had to pay a large fine and immediately paid in cash to the surprise of the police. As far as I was concerned, I was done with this town. My ex-fiancé served me a civil lawsuit for multiple different things, and my mom helped, but I was gone long before anything came of it. I am back in my new city and never plan to go back. I stopped checking on them after a few months of ending the insurance attempt and moved on with my life. This happened some years ago, and I am much better off now, but I am tired and need to go to sleep. If there is interest, I will share what happened with me after all this. Story 5. I, 36 male, live in an apartment on the 22nd floor with my mom and my brother. Let's call him Gary, 26 male. My other brother, let's call him Glenn, 34 male, and his wife left for a weekend trip out of town, so they asked us to watch their dog, Hector, a small dog, not sure the breed, but not important here, and their cat, a sphinx named Mort. They dropped them off at our place on Thursday night. We had a discussion afterwards because we live on a high floor that we needed to keep all the windows closed, mainly because the cat could jump anywhere. The next day, Friday, I got off work early, and so did Gary. I was doing some long overdue cleaning while Gary was napping. Mort was hanging out with me as I cleaned, sniffing things and climbing stuff he shouldn't be climbing. Standard cat behavior. I went into my bedroom to put something away. Mort followed me, so I closed my sliding glass door. When I petted him, he felt really warm, so I figured he just wanted to cool off in my room for a bit. I exited the room to grab a glass of water. While drinking the water at the sink, I heard a small thud, as if the cat had just leaped from my dresser to the floor or something. I went back into my room and I didn't see Mort anywhere. I did notice that my one window was open. It only opens up slightly, I presume, to prevent children from falling out. So I closed it. I searched the apartment but couldn't find the cat anywhere. I started to get worried, so I woke up Gary and told him the situation. He joined the search. He looked over the balcony edge toward the ground. I was honestly afraid of doing that myself. He saw nothing, so some hope returned and we continued looking. He asked again what the series of events was. I got to the part where my one window was open and I had closed it. He got a feeling and looked over the edge again, toward a slightly different area. "Oh no, bro, There is something down there. Oh no, is that him? I looked over the edge and I saw it. A mass of flesh, blood, and bone splattered all over the sidewalk below. I jumped back in shock. Oh no, no way! I collapsed on my knees in shame. Gary looked again and really confirmed it. He was also in shock. He kept looking at it multiple times, pacing the apartment. No, 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 oh my gosh. We were both in panic mode now. What do we do now? Who do we call to clean up the mess? How am I going to break this news to my brother and his wife? They don't have kids and have no intention of doing so, so their pets are their kids. They'll be devastated, and I felt like I had seriously damaged my relationship with Glenn and his wife forever. They'd never forgive me. It was all my fault. Gary started calling the animal authorities and whoever else, asking what to do and if someone could clean it up quickly. I was worried about any children walking by and being traumatized. They couldn't send anyone out to clean it until tomorrow. About 20 minutes passed when Gary said he thought someone down there was already cleaning it. He made his way down to talk to this person. As he was gone, Mom showed up. We had called her and filled her in. I broke down even further. This was my fault. A few minutes went by and I got a call from Gary. He said there was nobody down there, and furthermore, there wasn't any evidence of a cat falling to its death. The spot we saw was bone dry. If someone had cleaned it up that quickly, there would still at least be a wet spot from the water or from the blood because there had been a lot of it. He told me to keep looking around the apartment for him. I felt like it was false hope. We knew what we saw. We continued the search. Gary was calling around to see if anyone had brought the cat to an animal hospital or something. We were still baffled by the dry ground. It didn't make any sense. There had been blood everywhere. I specifically remembered seeing its forearm detached from its body. The unique purple of its skin contrasted with the bright red blood it was surrounded by. There was no way that could have been cleaned up so fast with no trace of anything. Then the cat walked out of the bedroom, looked at me as if to say, "Hey man, what's going on out here?" It scared me so much I jumped back. I yelled, "What, Mort?" Mom came running out of the bathroom. I called Gary back inside. We both flipped out, hugging each other and laughing. He was alive? Both Gary and I saw the carnage on the ground. It's imprinted in my memory now. Gary's too. It was absolutely traumatic to see. I have no idea how to explain it. The Sphinx was emitting some sort of ancient Egyptian cat magic or something, but I'm grateful for the outcome. I can't properly describe the roller coaster of emotions, the absolute lows of guilt, shame, and fear of losing my brother over this, to the elation and relief of seeing the cat walk through the room. The best possible way for the story to end. Has anybody else heard of something like this happening? Is there a name for this phenomenon? Story 6. When I was 18, I worked at my college's residence building at the front desk, and I think I almost got assaulted. Or worse. You be the judge. During the summer, the building operated as a hotel, so 2.5 floors were hotel rooms, and half of the 3rd floor were student rooms. The whole building operated with a hotel swipe key system that was pretty outdated, and all the doors were powered by 4 AA batteries. If the batteries died, there was a lengthy process to replace them and reprogram the door. A dark-haired guy came to the front desk from inside the building while I was working an overnight shift at around 1 or 2 in the morning and said he left his key card in his room. I made him a new one and made my first error of the night. Hotel guests could have as many room keys remade as they wanted, hypothetically. Students, however, were supposed to be given a temporary key card and charged $2 to be returned when theirs was located. I gave him a new key for his room and asked if he was a student or a hotel guest, and he replied, "Student." At this point, I should have checked our system to charge his account, but I was caught up doing administrative duties and forgot. I used to trust people way too easily at this job, but quickly learned not to. Later on in the night, maybe around 3 or 4 in the morning, he came to the desk again and said he couldn't get into his room. I asked if he just forgot his key again, and he said no, the door wasn't working. I asked if the light was coming on when he swiped his card and he said no, so I figured the batteries were dead. I told him I'd have to change the batteries and I went up to his room with him. He asked me for my name and I told him. He didn't tell me his. I opened the room door manually with a master key and told him I'd have to prop it open while I worked on the back panel to replace the batteries. He said, "No, it's okay, I'll close it," and closed and deadbolted the door locked. Really odd, but I tried not to think about it. I had changed the batteries on plenty of other doors by this point, and some students were iffy about having their doors propped open for their room to be on display for anyone walking by. He also had a thick accent, and I thought he might be an international student since we had a lot of students from other countries where English was not their first language. I gave him the benefit of the doubt and thought maybe it was also just a language barrier. At this point, though, I really felt like something was wrong, but I tried to ignore it so I didn't alarm him. While I was trying to focus on fixing the door as quickly as possible, he kept trying to entice me to go further into the room, saying his bed was broken and he needed me to take a look at it. There was something underneath it that needed to be fixed, etc. He held out a little gold house key and said, "I have a key, go get it," and threw it under the bed. He said there was a leak under the fridge. He just kept trying to get me down on the ground, throwing random problems at me. Obviously, I told him no. I'd send maintenance up in the morning to take a look at it if anything was broken. I had my back to him and he asked me if I would take off my glasses. I said, "No, I need them to see." His tone of voice changed and in the most steady, chilling manner he said, "Ella, it's okay. You can take them off." And from behind me, he reached around and tried to take off my glasses. I swatted his hand away and trying to remain composed said, "No thanks. I need to keep them on." Even though he was creeping me out, I didn't want to be rude to him. I didn't want to get in trouble if he complained about me or risk upsetting him and having him yell at me. I got up to grab something from the door repair kit and undid the door deadbolt and opened it up in the process. He jumped toward the door to close it again and told me to keep it closed. I told him no. I had to open it to start reprogramming it from the front. While I held the door open with my foot and grabbed something from the door repair kit, he started playing with the little wispy hairs at the top of my forehead and trying to touch my shoulder. I swatted him away again and asked him not to touch me and focused on getting out of there. He once again tried getting me to follow him into the bedroom, saying the bed was broken, and I went as far as the door frame to see if I could spot any actual problem with his bed. This is when I realized that he had nothing in his room, no dishes in the kitchen, no shower curtain in the bathroom, no sheets on the bed, nothing. This wasn't his room. My brain once again went back to the international student theory, thinking he had just arrived today and hadn't gotten a chance to buy anything yet. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew something was wrong. I fiddled around with the door for a few more seconds before announcing that it was fixed, and quickly gathered the door kit and left. Before I had reached the elevator, he came back out without his shoes on to follow me. He tried to get back in to get his shoes and called out, "Ella, the door isn't fixed. You need to come back." I went back and opened the door manually and told him if the door was broken, I'd have to send maintenance to fix it in the morning. I knew he was going to follow me to the elevator again, so I closed the door behind me once he went inside and ran down the stairwell as fast as I could. When I got to the front desk, I checked the computer and saw that the room he was in was supposed to be empty. It wasn't a student room or a hotel room. I locked myself in our back office and called campus security. He came down a few minutes later and went behind the desk. I yelled at him to get on the other side and wait. Now that I knew he wasn't a resident, he tore the corner off a slip of paper I had sitting on the desk and drew a flower on it, then put it back on top of my papers. When security arrived, he ran back up to the empty room and tried convincing them he lived there so he wouldn't have to leave. He kept showing them his key, which had decided to work on the door again somehow. They escorted him back downstairs and came to ask me if he really did live there. Obviously, he didn't. That's why I called them crying and terrified. He kept interjecting to argue that he did live there, but couldn't even recall his room number when asked. Security asked him for his student card and he couldn't produce it, so they told him he would have to leave if he couldn't prove he lived there. While they were grabbing his information, I listened from the office and could immediately tell he was lying. The phone number he gave was just a bunch of random numbers. The name he gave was prefixed by as if he was trying to think of a name. When they asked him for his address, he just said, "Across the street." One security guard asked if he lived in the apartments across the street, and he said yes, but couldn't tell them the building number. He said his apartment number was 1200, but I moved into that building a few months later, and apartment 1200 doesn't exist. When security asked what his purpose was for sneaking into a room, he just kept up the ums and ahs and saying he didn't know. They'd ask, "Were you trying to see a friend? Do you know anybody who lives here? Were you here to hurt somebody?" And he kept fidgeting and saying, "I don't know. No reason. I was just here." At one point, he tried to tell them he was my friend, at which point I poked my head out of the office to say that I literally had never seen him before that night. He left. We didn't call the police because he didn't actually do anything, but it was still unsettling. Later on, it dawned on me how he figured out that room was vacant. One of the housekeepers had been using it as her personal break room. A few days later, a housekeeper came to the desk and told me they found the door deadbolted open, the television on, and a housekeeper inside watching television. She must have forgotten to close the door when she left for the night, and when the man let himself into the building, he found it. I never saw him again, and to this day I have no clue what he was doing there. I haven't worked there since last winter, and overnight shifts still unsettle me. Story 7. Last year I cheated on my ex-girlfriend of 8 years, Annie, with a colleague, Jess, who I now have a 3-week-old son with. I have no excuse. It cost me my job and most of my friendships, along with the love of a good woman. I deserved it and never expected sympathy. Annie delivered my things to my parents' house before I even knew she knew about the cheating. She did not confront me. She just cut me out of her life without a word. I messaged everyone we knew begging them to ask her to talk to me, and I sent hundreds of messages saying how much I regretted everything and wanted her back. I never got a response. Jess saw the messages and it caused issues at first, but she became pregnant quickly, so we moved past it for the sake of our family, which we both wanted. I am fully committed to the relationship and have not even looked at another woman since things settled down. In the final stretch of Jess's pregnancy, about a month ago, I saw Annie in a shop for the first time since the breakup. She was cold toward me, but said that a few months ago she found a keychain my granddad got me when I was very young. It is not valuable, but she knows it means a lot to me, and she said I could come collect it the following Saturday morning. I explained that was 6 days after Jess was due to give birth, so I would probably need to be home, but she said I could either get it on Saturday or it was going in the bin, so I agreed to a time. My son was born a few days late, perfectly healthy, so he was less than 24 hours old on the Saturday I needed to collect the keychain. I planned to pop in on the way to the hospital, but when I got to my old house, Annie invited me in to talk about how things ended. I thought we had a good conversation and both walked away with closure. She let me apologize for how I treated her, wished me the best with my new family, and hugged me as I left. I admit I held on tightly for the hug, but it was because of relief, not lingering feelings. I spent less than an hour there, then headed to the hospital. I did not tell Jess because I know she still feels insecure about Annie, and I did not want to add fuel to that. When I arrived at the hospital after seeing Annie, Jess had revoked my access, and the ward manager would not tell me why. I was denied seeing my son for the second time ever, and did not respond well to being blindsided, so security removed me. I tried calling Jess and her mom repeatedly, and the only response I got was a screen recording of a message from Annie. It was doorbell footage of me walking in at 9:30 and back out just after 10:15, and the hug is only partly visible, so it looks like we could have been kissing. The message with it said, "Did he even shower and change his clothes between being with me and holding his son? Congratulations on being tied to him for the next 18 years. I hope it is everything you dreamed of." No one believes this is a setup. I would never have expected this from Annie, and neither would anyone else. So they reject the idea that it is a lie. I sent her a message asking why she did this, assuming I was still blocked. Her response was that she was not going to let me play innocent, and that I may have deleted all our messages over the past few months, but she has not. There are no messages, but she blocked me again, so I have nothing to clear my name. She waited in silence for almost a year, then took the most hurtful revenge she could. I have met my son once, minutes after he was born, and now Jess is refusing contact and will not let me see him. Court will take months and my heart hurts every minute. I know what I did to Annie was awful, but I do not deserve this. I have no one to talk to because not even my own mother believes me. Her only question was why I ruined my life with a baby when Annie was willing to reconcile, and that is about the most supportive thing she has said to me since the breakup. The few friends who stuck with me assume the worst too, and it is crushing that not a single person I know sees this for what it is. Everything is ruined. Story 8. It was 2005, and the lady I had met over the internet, after visiting me in Australia and me visiting her in the United States and meeting her folks, had now come to be with me, and we had married. Since arriving to stay, she had problems as her vocational college degree was not recognized in Australia, making it hard to get a job. She was determined and flexible, though, and did temp work, clerical and receptionist, using skills she had learned while working at college as a librarian. She finally got a real job as a receptionist and clerk at a loan brokerage and got on with things. One ongoing problem was that sales reps would have clients come in and tell the women to make coffees. That was not part of their role. So my wife and coworkers were told not to do that. It was up to the salesperson to make coffee for themselves and clients. This was part of an initiative to try to retain women in these roles, as they did not tend to stay long in what was a somewhat anarchic office. So my wife is working, and a salesperson's client comes in, and she buzzed the guy. He came out and told her to make them both coffees. She tried to be discreet, but said that he knew she could not do that. He blew up, went to her supervisor, and the supervisor told my wife to make the coffees. Later, she had her in the office and fired her. She was fired for trying to do as she was told, the opposite of malicious compliance. But the turnabout comes anyway. She was fired but asked to stay on until they found a replacement. For the next 2 months, she continued to go to work, now ready to refuse anything she did not want to do, especially the coffee making. The same guy tried once. She said no, so fire me. They could not find a replacement. Word of their issues had spread in the local receptionist and clerical field. Edit. She reminded me the agency she had gotten the job through refused to send anyone. It was the third person in a row let go when the probationary period was nearly up, so the agency was not being paid their commission. Then she was offered a much better job with real responsibility and standing, and almost 30% more salary, walked in the next day and told them she was leaving at the end of the day. No notice required, of course, and they had still not found a replacement and did not find one for months more, by which time they were trying to replace 2 of them. Eventually, the company let the woman's supervisor go and initiated sensible rules. My wife never looked back, but we still chuckle 18 years later at how well getting fired worked out for her and how badly it ended for the supervisor who fired her staff for obeying the rules. Story 9. My parents are both Eastern Orthodox Christians and believe that if a baby dies before baptism, it goes to limbo and not heaven. My boyfriend, the father of my son, is a Protestant, and I am an agnostic. We had agreed that we would not force any religion on our son, allowing him to choose later in his life. When I told my parents, my mother just laughed and said she would secretly christen my son like it was done in the Soviet era. I thought she was joking, because she has never been a strict Christian and usually respected my decisions. I was completely wrong. My mother visits us once a year in the spring and helps around the house because both my boyfriend and I work long hours. On Christmas, I found out that she had taken him to a church last March and baptized him, with a priest and everything. The worst part was that the christening certificate was given to me and my boyfriend as a Christmas present. My dad said it was time we all shared this joy and that we could finally be relieved that God was watching over our son. This was the first time my boyfriend got visibly upset, but we could not do or say anything because half the family was there and we had no place to go since we live in a different country. Yesterday we returned home and my boyfriend cannot get over it. I also feel betrayed that my own mother would so blatantly ignore my decision. He has been adamant about keeping her out of our house and not visiting my parents anymore. He says it is an insult to our parenting, as if they are stating that we are bad parents because we are not religious. I do not know what to do. I have not spoken to her yet because I am angry and hurt and do not want to say something I will regret. Story 10. I, 29 female, have been with my husband, 30 male, for 7 years, married for 4. I never suspected he was unfaithful or unhappy in our marriage. He always joked we were still in the honeymoon phase nearly 5 years and 2 kids in. I would not have questioned that were it not for something I found in his car last month. While buckling our daughter into her car seat, I noticed something between the cushions. I pulled it out and saw that it was a tampon. This would not have been unusual had I not had an IUD that stopped my period for the past year, and I did not recognize the wrapper. I asked my husband about it, and he seemed confused until I told him where I found it and why I was sure it was not mine. He shrugged and said it probably belonged to his coworker Fiona. It is not uncommon for him to carpool to lunch with coworkers, and we are both fairly close to Fiona and her husband, so I figured it was possible the tampon slipped from her purse during a ride. I let it go. A couple weeks later, we had dinner with Fiona and her husband. I wanted to believe my husband, but could not get over how it had been tucked in the seat and how he seemed unconcerned. I did something I now feel crazy for doing. I faked an emergency and asked Fiona if she had any tampons. She handed me one almost identical to the one I had found, and I felt relieved. That explained it. Probably innocent. But this morning I found another tampon, this time in my sock drawer. Now I feel physically ill at the thought of my husband having an affair, and even worse at the idea that the woman might have left these tampons out for me to find. If it was Fiona, why would she give herself away by handing me the same kind the other night? In any other situation, I would want to talk to my husband, but I feel too sick and embarrassed to confront him with what I found. Story 11. This was when I was about 8 in 2001. My mom, brother, aunt, and grandma had all traveled to Chicago to see Dinosaur Sue. We stayed in a nearby hotel for about 5 days. It was very upscale, new, and overall very nice. During those days, my mom would let me run ahead to the elevator when we returned from swimming or getting ice, and let me ride up alone, since our room was right to the left of the elevator, and my grandma always kept the door cracked. One day, after leaving the pool with wet hair, still in my swimsuit, I did the same routine. I went up to the 7th floor and went to the second door to the left, like I had 20 times before. I knocked and knocked, but no one answered. I felt strangely alarmed, though I knew I could always return to the lobby or that my mom would be up soon. I waited by the elevator, watching the display. The elevator arrived on my floor, dinged, and opened. Empty. At that point, something felt very wrong. I went back to the door, crying and cold. Finally, after about a minute, a very old woman opened the door and said, "Dear, I told you already yesterday, this is not your room." I had never been there before. She added, "It will be fine. I am very sorry, but I am on the phone with my son. Give it a few more minutes. Your mother is coming." Then she closed the door on me. I was stunned. How could anyone close the door on a crying child who had lost their mother? Almost immediately after she shut the door, the elevator opened and my mom rushed out, crying, grabbing me and asking where I had been. She tried the door, but it wasn't ours. She was shocked. I explained what had happened. We got back in the elevator, and when she pressed 7, the doors closed briefly and reopened without moving. This time, my grandmother was standing in our doorway crying with relief. Apparently, I had been missing for 45 minutes. The police had been called, every floor searched, even locked and vacant rooms opened. My mom had just gone back to the pool to look for me when, on the way back up, she found me. But the security footage showed something disturbing. It captured me getting into the elevator but never getting out. It showed my mom getting in, 10 minutes passing, and then her exiting on the 7th floor with me in her arms. They checked every camera on every floor, and nothing. The staff and police were shaken. They thought maybe someone had taken me and returned me, but my hair was still wet. No one could explain it. To this day, we still talk about it. For the investigation, they locked down the hotel, checked every guest, and even photographed women over 50 to see if they matched the woman I described. None did. The only thing I could connect was that the old woman and I had almost identical blue eyes, unusually bright for someone with dark hair, just like mine. Story 12. This ended a couple of months ago, and only now do I feel comfortable sharing it. For background, I am a 24-year-old woman in Australia, working at a venue that caters to an adult audience. One night, near the end of my shift, a patron offered to buy me a drink. By policy, I had to accept. We chatted briefly. I upsold him to a few expensive drinks, then excused myself, saying my shift was ending. He stood up with a creepy grin and offered to walk me to my car. I declined politely and walked past our biggest bouncer. He didn't follow. Normal night, except it wasn't the end. A week later, when I returned after some days off, I was told a man had been coming in nightly asking for me. That night, he returned. I joined him, And while he kept that unsettling grin, I continued trying to upsell drinks. After about half an hour, I made my excuses to leave, but he refused. The more I insisted, the angrier he got, until I signaled a bouncer, who intervened but didn't throw him out. He started following me around, even trying to enter staff-only areas, until another bouncer finally removed him. I finished my shift, but when I got to my car, he was sitting on the bonnet, waiting. He told me how sigh I looked and demanded a ride. When I refused, he grabbed my arm. I jabbed my key into his shoulder, shoved him down, jumped in my car, and sped away as he pounded the window furiously. 5 minutes later, sure I wasn't being followed, I pulled over, called my workplace, and warned them. Then I broke down crying. It wasn't the first time I had been grabbed, but you never get used to it. The next day, the owner called to check on me and insisted I take time off. For weeks, the man came back nightly, asking for me, until finally he stopped. I returned to work, relieved. But strange things began happening at home. Doors I thought I closed were open, lights on or off, items moved. I chalked it up to stress, but it worsened. Then one day I realized I'd forgotten some clothes for work, so I returned home. I found the lights and TV on. Inside, after grabbing my things, I froze. He was blocking the door, grinning. After a long silence, I screamed, demanding he leave, asking how he knew where I lived. He just smiled and said, "Welcome home, honey. You're back early." Panic kicked in. I threw everything I had at him and bolted out the back door, sprinting faster than I ever had. I hid, sobbing, until I could sneak back to my car and escape. I called the police from work. When they searched my home, they discovered he had been living in my crawl space. That explained the doors, lights, and misplaced items. I packed what I could and left. I moved states, changed everything. I have never been back. Creepy stalker guy, let's never meet again. Story 13. I, 34 male, my ex-wife, 35 female, call her ex my neighbor, and my neighbor's wife, 37 female, call her L. My wife and I married in 2009 and had our baby in 2010. In November of 2010, while she was asleep, a flirty message popped up on her phone. I checked and saw it was from our neighbor. Going through every single message, I discovered sting, sharing nudes, and even plans for hotel meetups. This had been going on since the first week of our marriage. My world crumbled. I took screenshots of everything. The next day, I told Elle about the affair. She and her husband had also been married for 4 years and had their baby around the same time we had ours. I confronted my wife and told her I wanted a divorce. She cried, but I stood firm. I also did a paternity test since the affair matched the conception timeline. 2 days later, I came home from work to find our baby crying alone and my wife gone. She had left a letter saying she never loved me, had left with the neighbor, and told me not to contact them. I couldn't believe a mother would abandon her 6-month-old baby. Elle showed me a similar letter from her husband. I felt terrible for her, as she was dealing with postpartum depression. The paternity test later confirmed my son was mine. I tried contacting X's family, but they didn't know where she was. Her father even said she would not be allowed back in their home. Elle was very supportive, often coming over to watch the kids and even breastfeeding both hers and mine. Over time, we became like a family. My son knew only her as his mom, and eventually we started dating. A year later, we were engaged, and in 2013, we married. Our first child together was born in 2015. We often talked about how disrespected we were by our exes, but life moved on and we were happy. In 2018, my son accidentally saw an old photo of X, so we decided to tell him his birth mother had died in a car accident years ago, and that Elle had raised him since he was 6 months old. Fast forward to 2 days ago, I received an anonymous email. "I want to see my son and want my family back. We are not divorced yet. I knew it was X." I showed it to Elle, who panicked and asked if I would take her back. I reassured her that she was an ugly past and I would never leave her. I would never take X back,